Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to my sewing lair. I want to share with you my best tips for production sewing for this wonderful block, which is a triangle and a square. As its name suggests, it is a triangle and a square. This is a 3.5-inch cut block. It will finish at 3 inches. The hallmark of a perfect block is going to be exactly 1/4 inch headspace and exactly 1/4 inch space at the bottom, so that when you sew it, it will come to a perfect point when you have the 1/4 inch here and 1/4 inch here. I actually employ 2 rulers to do this, and that is a little bit luxurious, I suppose, but I had initially the Tri-Rex ruler, which is a 2-part ruler, which consists of the triangle and the rec. So that's why it's called Tri-Rex. This will make perfect right-sized cuts for you. And I actually use this ruler, but I don't use it as intended, because my preference for making any block that has a high degree of bias in it is by using the following techniques. Use an oversized cutting and an accurate trim down tool. And for my accurate trim down tool, I use Deb Tucker's V-Block. Now, why do not use this for the whole thing? I don't like how this is cut. Using this piece to cut, I prefer to use the upsize method using Deb's ruler and using the Tri-Rec tool, the triangle piece, to both cut my oversized strip, and I'm going to show you a special technique for doing the shoulders. What's my special technique? It is cutting a rectangle so that you only place your sidebar piece, the rec tool, one time. You're lining one edge, you're making one cut, and you have exactly what you need. And if you're making hundreds of these, I guarantee you this is the quickest way to do it. For my 3.5-inch cut block, which finishes at 3, I actually do a 4-inch strip, and then I cut it 2.75 inches, and that gives me exactly the mirroring that I want to do. There's a math formula for it, but I'll spare it you. It'll make your head hurt. But rather, if you have this tool, and it's not a very expensive tool, then all you have to do is line this up, make a mark, and make another mark, and then figure out where you need to be. And in this particular instance, I need to be at the 4-inch mark. So I'm lining my tool up, and that's where my line needs to be, at the 4-inch. And then I'm measuring across here, and that's going to be 2.75 inches, or 2 6/8. All right. So that's really all you need to do. And as you, as you move up this, you see how the block is going to get successively smaller for the smaller block that you need, because you're always, moving this in. But that's the easy way to do it. You don't need to worry about math. If you can draw a straightish line, that's going to work fine, because you don't have to be accurate, because we're using an upsize method. The other method that I use is I stack fabric, and I use a very sharp blade and my rotary cutter. This is what's going to give you the best production. I have a rectangle piece of fabric, and the other thing I'm always doing is lining up my piece, and I'm using a helper ruler. I don't see people use this very often, and I'm not really sure why, but we're going to make our first cut. There's more economical ways to do this, but for our purposes, we're just going to make this cut, and then we're going to use a helper ruler, or just use the other side of this ruler, butt it, move this out of the way, and then cut. This way you're never cutting towards you or having to teach yourself to cut with your left hand. So tip, use a ruler butt. Next tip, to do production sewing, we are going to employ glue basting, where we're going to work with one side and then the other of our piece. Now this is important. Don't get this. Oh, sorry. This isn't really the one I want. That's a smaller rectangle. This is the one that we want to use. So here I'm just going to glue baste. Don't get mixed up. Wide to narrow. Narrow to wide. Wide to narrow at the top. Narrow to wide at the bottom. And then we want to overlap by about 1/4 of an inch, so that nestles right up. That gets lined up there. And then again, you're just doing however many of these you need. You just line up your triangles that you've already cut, run a bead of glue against it, and then I hit it with a hot iron. So once you get all of these stacked up, go to your sewing machine and sew with a full 1/4 inch seam. And the reason you need a full 1/4 inch seam is because you need full 1/4 inch clearance up here. If you're sewing with a scant 1/4 inch, you're going to get skinnied out up here and on the sides. Again, we're employing a trim down method, oversize and trim down method, so you're not going to get in trouble. You do need to sew straight though, and if you're not sewing straight, you're going to see it on your trim down for sure. So if you have hundreds of these, you're glue basting them. Also, you can use a pair of tweezers. This is what it looks like on the back. You can see where that, my glue's not quite dry, but you can see where that is poking out. And once you stack all of these up, when you go to the machine, it is fast, fast, fast. You don't need to think. It's zombie sewing. And if you've got a really fast sewing machine like a semi-industrial that's doing 1,500 versus a 950 or 1,050 a minute, you are going very fast, 50% faster to get your sewing done. So keep that in mind as well. Sounds like I have a sweatshop. I don't, but it feels that way sometimes. The other thing that you want to employ is not handling your blocks very often. So here we have a finished block. This one actually isn't pressed. Let me press it. Okay, so when I say finished, we've finished the construction of it. Now we're going to do the trimming of it. Again, let's say you have 50 of these blocks. Keep everything oriented the same way. This actually is already trimmed down, but if you stack everything up, and our very first cut is going to be with our blocks this way. You employ the same technique with half square triangles or any block where you're making 2 cuts and then you have to rotate the block. If you rotate 100 blocks, you've rotated it 100 times. Rather, in this method, you are rotating the whole pile and you're doing it just once. So with this particular accurate trim down method, I am And the other thing you would want to do is to mark where you want to be on your ruler. And I need to be at the 3-inch finished. Rulers such as these will show you where you're wobbling on your stitching, so it's a very good way to develop better practices. I actually cut this a little wider than my strip a little wider than I typically do. I don't like wasting that much, but you can see I've just got slivers off the end. So we're going to do our cut and our cut, and then we're going to push this aside. We're going to go to our next one. This happens to already be trimmed. Okay, so just going through the pile, just left to right, or right to left, depending on how you're working. And then we're going to take our pile where we've made all of those first cuts. We're going to rotate the whole pile, and now we're going to reorient ourselves for both the block and the ruler. And now our ruler, we're working with a cut size. I've got to be at the 3.5 inch, and line that up nice and square. Just got slivers coming off here on the sides, and there we have a perfect triangle in a square. I promise you that this method is the fastest and most accurate method that you can use to make this. And this is a block that should be foundational into your quilting life because you can use it in many different patterns. It happens to be a kissing cousin to a diamond rack, but I prefer to have a whole diamond on a diamond rack, and I'm going to show you in this quilt block. This is where I have used this beautiful block. It provides the point on this block here for my quilt. And you can see it creates, when paired with these other angles, it creates a lot of movement in the quilt. So there you have it. Those are my pro tips for creating a quick, accurate, beautiful triangle and square. I hope you'll try these techniques and let me know how they work for you.